If you've watched any of the content that I've produced over the past year and a half or so on the main podcast channel, which you should check out, I've done a few videos on the ever-increasing problem of barbershops on UK high streets. Now, this doesn't sound too much like a problem because you go, well, Harry, there's barbershops on the high street. They're just legitimate businesses giving people haircuts. How can that be a problem? Well, the problem is that there's just so bloody many of them. Every single high street in every single town across the country is absolutely plastered with barbershops, and they're all foreign-owned, Turkish or otherwise ethnic barbershops. And these are in towns, again, across the country that otherwise tend to look, a lot of the time, otherwise derelict. So you wonder to yourself, when there's such a massive presence of these on the high street, they're all competing with one another, oftentimes they're right next to one another, how are they staying in business? And there's been a lot of speculation to this, but numerous police reports and actual incidents that we know about prove that quite a lot of these are fronts for foreign money laundering and people trafficking. I personally have spoken to somebody in the past from the Home Office, now this is only anecdotal, but still, somebody from the Home Office who has told me that, yeah, they're fronts for money smuggling and drugs trading. He also spoke about how a lot of the nail salons, the Asian-owned nail salons that you find on high streets, tend to be fronts for Asian human trafficking as well. So there's this huge presence of very likely criminal behaviour on our high streets that goes completely unaddressed by our politicians, that goes completely unaddressed by our local councils. Nothing gets done about it, and it gets worse and worse every year. And that's not to say that all of these places are criminal fronts, but I would say a significant enough portion of them are to make it a real problem, because we're a historic country. We have thousands of years of history. Oftentimes, many of our historic market towns in particular will be near enough to 1,000 years old, if not slightly older. And you'll go there and find that amongst all of the beautiful architecture, which is going to waste and not being well kept, the high street will look something like this. I'll illustrate it for you right now. Empty shop, Turkish barber. Empty shop, Turkish barber, Turkish barber. Empty shop, nail salon. Phone shop, Turkish barber. Repeat ad nauseum. This is the typical makeup of your high street in Britain these days. You'll have slightly out of town retail parks where you'll have the big name brands, like say you'll have clothing brands like Next on these retail parks. But otherwise, the actual town centres are horrible. Even leftists like Aaron Bastani has been noticing this as he's been going through otherwise beautiful market towns in Britain, that these places feel like you're going through the ruins of an ancient civilization. But again, these places are able to survive economic hardships despite the increase in rents, the increase in energy prices, the increase in duties that you need to pay to the councils. It's absolutely ridiculous. So all of this brings us to this new article that's been released by the Daily Mail the other day from their investigative reporter Sue Reed, talking about the disturbing reason behind Britain's barbershop boom. 665 opened last year. Now, in any normal market where all of these businesses are having to compete for the same limited market, because yeah, the market is technically everybody, but also not everybody needs a haircut every single day of the year. They barely even need them multiple times a month. Most people maybe get their haircut once every few weeks at most. So where is the demand for this coming from? Well, it's not coming from anywhere. And you can see why as she illustrates some examples throughout this. But the problem is so prevalent everywhere. She uses the example of Foles Hill, once a tiny rural hamlet that was mentioned in the Doomsday Book, so it goes back at least almost 1,000 years. You know, should be somewhere that we have great respect for, that should be booming with local independent businesses, but instead it's shabby multicultural suburb of modern Coventry. It has a main road, Foles Hill Road, which it says lined with drab houses, cheap clothing stores, kebab takeaways, fried chicken shops, and Turkish-style barber shops, multiple of them. This is how every town looks right now. And this is one of the great travesties of it, because on a purely aesthetic level, it makes it miserable to live in these places. You're in a place that you know has deep history, that should be well respected and loved and cared after by the local residents, and instead they're dirty, they're run down, places are derelict and boarded up, and all you have to comfort you is the look and sound of kebab takeaways, fried shops, and barbershops, most of which also have this hideous, absolutely hideous neon lighting. Now, I personally live in a market town somewhere up north. I'm not going to tell you exactly where, but I've noticed in some of the high streets there is these nail salons opening up. There never used to be there. Now, market towns typically have this lovely old school, old-fashioned aesthetic to them, where you've got old-fashioned shop windows, old-fashioned shop signage that gives it a homely and welcoming aesthetic. This place has these garish, bright, neon lights blasting out of you that do not fit anywhere. They do not look right in that area, and it feels horrible to walk past because it's so out of place. And I know I sound like the evil council from Hot Fuzz right now, but they were the good guys. Sorry to break it to you, it doesn't fit in with the village's rustic aesthetic. Get out. That's my feeling. But it carries on, because it's not just the look of these places that makes it miserable, it's the fact you can't trust anybody and you can't feel safe there, because police statistics reveal the area is notorious for violence, sex offences, and shoplifting. Stabbings happen, but there's plenty of money there because you get black Mercedes and Range Rovers, many with darkened windows, wonder why, often parked up outside of these barbershops, and you wonder, well, barbershops empty 95% of the time, where are you getting money for these Mercedes? And it carries on with a number of different examples of different towns. This right here is what Britain looks like. This is modern, multicultural Britain. This is the Britain that Blair opened us up to. So thank you very much for that. Whether or not any of these are legitimate businesses or even good businesses, it looks horrible. It looks like somewhere I wouldn't want to live, and every town looks like this now. You're removing the actual diversity and variety that existed within Britain for what? So that you can get dash cut and then nip in for some Polish food. Brilliant. Brilliant. This is the meaning of life, is it? Oh, there's a usual suspect, Hawa Rahimpur, who was 30 years old, gang of fellow Iranian Kurds. That's another thing. These Turkish barbershops are not often run by Turks. Detained on suspicion of bringing 10,000 migrants into Dover from the French coast in small boats. Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. More examples like Hazelmere. One of the interesting things here is it brings up some actual statistics. So again, 665 opened last year. How are they all making money when they should all be competing with one another? And oftentimes you'll see that they're right next to each other on the high street. According to the local data company, a nationwide provider of retail information, there are now 18,624 barbershops operating in Britain, an increase of more than 50% on 2018. At least 665 opened last year alone, according to the National Hair and Beauty Foundation. So 50% increase on 2018. Why? Why? I know there's more people in the country than there were in 2018, but surely they don't need 50% more barbershops from 2018 to keep up with all of the rampant demand that brings into the country. They say that the police have warned about gangs of Kurds and Albanians. They're replacing car washes and nail salons as cash-only businesses, oiling the wheels of organised crime rings operating in the UK. There are a few examples that they bring up here as well, and you can see who they're going to be about from these perp photos that they include in the article. Arrest of the linchpin of a huge Channel people smuggling ring in 2022 that first brought the activities of some of the more dubious barbershops to the attention of the National Crime Agency. Hawa Rahimpur, one of the people we looked at earlier, his gang of fellow Iranian Kurds brought 10,000 migrants in. Rahimpur, who had arrived in the country illegally, those women and children must have been pushed off the boat to make sure that he could get here, was granted asylum after claiming to have suffered political oppression in his home country, because it's that easy. It's that easy. You get for your asylum decision maker and you say, oh, I was being persecuted. Persecuted in my country. That's what happened. And they go, oh, poor baby, stamp, but you can come straight in. Do you want some benefits? Do you want some benefits? We've got an open shop here for you. Do you want to start a barber shop? I'm sure it's only legal. Go for it. That's how easy it is over here. In his home country, it was driving a top-of-the-range Mercedes when he was caught by the police. Very lucrative business, barbershops, which is how it's always historically been in the UK. Everybody knows that first you had kings here, and then you had landed gentry and lords, and then barbershop owners here. That's how it's always worked in the British hierarchy. But his gang had netted £13 million in cash from the crossings, and it needed to be laundered somehow. So Rahimpur, a former barber, entered the hairstyling business a few years ago in Camden, North London. And they go on to give a few more examples. One was an Albanian, Gulwali Jeberkel, who, after he was caught or realised he was being watched by the police, fled to Kabul, Afghanistan. Trustworthy gentleman, I'm sure. Money laundering salons have been linked to terrorism. West London snipper Tarek Namuz, proprietor of Boss Crew Barbers, was sentenced to 12 years after sending £11,000 to Syria for the purchase of weapons and explosives to use against Assad. Fantastic. Fan-bloody-tastic. And this is happening all over the place. And again, they come here illegally, they set up businesses that operate illegally so that they can smuggle in more people who are illegal. What part of this process benefits the British people? What part of this process is moral or virtuous in any way? It is criminality from the top to the bottom. Shockingly enough, when people come into the country illegally and then get shown that they have no consequences for that action, they carry on doing illegal things because they know they can get away with it. And it just perpetuates itself over and over again. But this has become more and more obvious to many people. Lots of people in this article who spoke to Sue Reed said that there's 30 barbershops in my shop. There's one even on the Isle of Man. Why are they there? And it's one of the other ways it's becoming more obvious to people is that people who actually use these places for haircuts, I know, shocked sometimes they actually get business like that, get not very good service, very bad service in fact. Mike Taylor, who runs a hairdressers training academy in Dorset, claims customers are catching skin infections such as ringworm from cheap, dirty, unqualified barbershops littering high streets. So this is a bit of a public service announcement right here. Number one, to our politicians and police, that you need to crack down on this and get these off of our streets. Number two, to the councils, to stop letting these businesses open in the first place. And number three, to you, the viewer right here, which is even if you suspect that one of these businesses is legitimate, do not patronize it. Do not go in, do not get a haircut, do not support these businesses owned by foreigners, and similarly, do not support them because you do not know if the people who are going to be cutting your hair are actually qualified for the job, where they come from, and if potentially you're going to get bloody ringworm from it.